All right, we're going to take a word you use all the time, neighbor, and we're going to completely tear it apart. We'll be diving into an ancient story and some pretty wild modern science to show you that your real neighbor is almost definitely not the person living next door.
So let me ask you straight up, who is your neighbor? Seriously, take a second. Who pops into your head? Is it the person you share a fence with? Or is it more of a concept? Whatever your answer is, just hold that thought for a moment.
Okay, so chances are you landed on something like what's on the left, right? A neighbor is, well, the person who lives next door. It's about geography. Simple. But there's this ancient definition that turns everything on its head. It says your neighbor is actually the person you'd cross the road to avoid, maybe even your rival. Whoa, now that's a definition with some real bite to it.
So, to really get where this radical idea comes from, we've got to travel back about 2,000 years. We're going to look at a famous story, a parable that has a sting that is just as sharp today as it was way back then. You know, the whole thing kicks off with a question from a lawyer. But here's the thing. He wasn't actually curious. Not really. He was looking for a loophole. He wanted to draw a nice, neat little circle around who he was responsible for. Basically, what he was really asking was, so who can I get away with not caring about? And the answer he gets is this story. Picture this. A guy gets beaten, robbed, and just left for dead on a really dangerous road. First, a priest comes along, sees him, and just crosses the street to avoid him. Then, a Levite, another religious insider, does the exact same thing. But then, the hero of the story shows up, and this is the part that would have blown the original audience's minds. The hero is a Samaritan. And you have to understand, Samaritans and Jews were arch enemies. This was the ultimate them. Now, it's really easy to point fingers at the priest and the Levite, right? But what if I told you modern psychology shows we're probably more like them than we'd care to admit? It turns out there are some really powerful, kind of invisible forces that make good people, people like you and me, just sidestep someone in need. And that brings us to this absolutely landmark experiment from 1973. It was done at Princeton University, and they called it, you guessed it, the Good Samaritan Study. They decided to put this ancient moral dilemma to a real-world test. The setup for this was just genius. They got a bunch of seminary students, people studying to be pastors and priests, and had them prepare a talk on the parable of the Good Samaritan. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Then, they sent them to another building to give the speech, but here's the twist. They told half of them, you've got plenty of time, and the other half, oh man, you're running late. And of course, on the way, they planted an actor slumped in a doorway, clearly in distress. Okay, get ready for this, because the results are just wild. The students who thought they had plenty of time, a pretty decent 63% of them stopped to help. But the ones who were told they were running late, that number just nosedives. Only 10% stopped. Think about that. Some of them literally stepped over a person in need on their way to give a talk about helping a person in need.
So what's going on here? Well, the researchers called it cognitive narrowing, and it's basically this. When we're stressed or in a hurry, our brain puts on blinders. Our world just shrinks down to our own goal, and everything else, including a person's suffering right in front of us, doesn't even really register. They just become an obstacle, an annoyance in our path.
But being in a hurry, that's only one piece of the puzzle. There's another, even deeper reason we might walk by someone. It's something that's literally hardwired into our brains, a powerful, ancient, us versus them instinct. Okay, this is where the science gets super fascinating. Check this out. When our brain sees someone we identify as part of our in-group, our tribe, it gets a nice little hit of oxytocin. That's the bonding hormone. But when we see someone from an out-group, a different part of the brain often kicks in, the amygdala, our threat detection center. We are biologically, chemically primed to make a snap judgment, us or them. And this can get, well, pretty dark. A famous study by Harris and Fisk had people look at images of those on the absolute margins of society, like homeless individuals. And what they found was chilling. The part of the brain that lights up when we recognize another person as a thinking, feeling human, it just didn't. As the researchers put it, the brain reacted as if it were looking at objects. They call this infrahumanization. It's a lot to take in. Okay, let's step back and put all these pieces together. We've got this ancient story, a mind-bending psychology experiment, and some pretty hard neuroscience. And they're all pointing in the exact same direction, that being a real neighbor is actually incredibly hard. It's inconvenient by its very nature.
And we can't just gloss over this or make it a feel-good story. What the Samaritan did had real costs. I mean, look at the invoice. It cost him his time. It cost him money. He put his own personal safety on the line. And maybe biggest of all, he took a huge social risk by helping someone his entire culture saw as an enemy. This shows that being a neighbor isn't some warm, fuzzy feeling. It's an expensive choice.
And here is the final, perfect detail that just drives the whole point home. At the end of the story, when the lawyer who started this whole thing is asked to name who the real neighbor was, he can't even say the word Samaritan. He just mumbles, "the one who showed mercy." That's how deep the prejudice ran. He couldn't even give the hero his name.
So what's the takeaway here? It's that we have to throw out that comfortable, easy definition we started with. Being a neighbor has absolutely nothing to do with living on the same street or sharing a property line. It's not about the people who fit neatly into our lives. No, what this ancient story and all this modern science are screaming at us is something far more challenging. Your neighbor is the person whose need makes your life complicated. They're the one who interrupts your schedule, who messes with your budget, who forces you to cross those us versus them lines. Your neighbor is the person whose existence makes your life beautifully, profoundly, and meaningfully messy. And that is a definition worth thinking about.